All right, welcome to another episode of Sales Transformation. Super pumped up to have my boy Marcus Chan back on the show here. Marcus recently launched a new book called Six Figures Sales Secrets. We're definitely going to talk about that and some of the stuff in the book. And we're just going to have a good time riffing about some awesome stuff. So sit back, take some notes. You may want to listen to this one twice because I know Marcus is going to bring the heat. Marcus, how you doing?
Dude, Colin, so good to see you again, my man. It's my pleasure to be on here.
Yeah, awesome. So tell me what's going on with you. You launched the book. What was the reason for the launch of the book? And then we're going to get into some of the good stuff that you love talking about.
Awesome, cool. So I recently launched the book, and what was really interesting it's one of the things where I think everyone talks about how they want to write a book, they want to launch a book, they want to do these things. And I've definitely been thinking about it for years, but pretty scared to actually even commit to it. So at the end of March, I just put a post out there. I'm like, hey, I think about writing a book. And I got some pretty positive feedback. People are like, hey, you should definitely do it. I'm like, okay. I feel like I held myself accountable publicly now, so now I have to do it. So yeah, I set a goal.
Peer pressure, man. Peer pressure.
Dude, I know. I was like, that's the only way I'm gonna get this done if I commit to other people. So I committed to it, and it took me about 3 months to write the first draft, and then we officially launched it. It took about just under 5 months from deciding to do it to launching it. And in the first week, we hit the Wall Street Journal bestsellers list, USA Today, Amazon, and a bunch of categories as well. But it's been pretty insane to be able to do, and also very humbling to take what's in my head and put it into a book.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, like what you do is you help reps make an extra 50, 100,000 a year, right? That's your jam, right? So I'm assuming, I haven't gotten my copy of the book yet, but maybe it's in the mail. Maybe it's coming soon. We'll see.
We'll ship it over to you. Yeah.
All right. So, but I'm assuming that the book contains all of the stuff that you've learned and been doing with these reps that you're helping make extra 50, 100 grand a year.
Yeah. So essentially I took a look back, and I think probably similar to you and a lot of people in the sales space, we've all read probably lots of sales books, a lot of sales content. And I think about all the bad ones I read and some of the good ones. And I'm like, what are some common themes I want to incorporate in this book? But more importantly, how can I write a book that whether if I was brand new, I could say, here you go, young Marcus, do everything in this book. Or if I'm seasoned or tenured, I can say, hey, read this, and you'll pull away golden nuggets that will improve your game. And that's the book I wrote. I took 15 plus years of like all my mistakes, all my failures, and I compiled into a step-by-step guide that's designed to help you get results. But also in how I even wrote the book, it was also very intentional too, where I've also read books where it's like almost like textbook-like. It's like very tactical, which is very good, but it's kind of hard to get through. So I'm like, how can I write it in a way where it has very specific tactics so you can read it and take action, but also incorporate stories in real life situations so you're able to have context to the situations to actually apply what you learn as well and to keep going through. So my goal was you read it and you can't put it down. That was my goal. Like you read and you can't put it down. It becomes like your Bible that you will always refer back to. And that's why I created it for. And it's been pretty cool so far. And I feel it's like wildly humbling to get like messages every day, to see the Amazon reviews about how people are saying this book has been just like exactly what they needed, right? Like I got this book, a message from a guy he's been in sales for like 20 plus years. He's been really struggling the last several years. Transitioned from like field sales to like online selling and like only Zoom. He messaged me his book. He's like, this book is literally changing how I think about sales. I'm like, wow. Because he was so old school in his mindset before. It was like knock on doors, thousands of calls a day. I'm like, there's a better way of doing it. And that's what I wrote this book for.
I want to go back for a second and just talk a little bit about your experience, right? Because I remember part of your story is you were one of the worst reps and almost got fired and then worked your way up pretty quickly. So can you just take me back to kind of that experience of like, what did you do differently to go from like almost being fired in sales to being like a top performer?
Yeah. So I wish I could say I took a magic pill, had a magic script, had a magic book, had a magic whatever, but that's just not the case. When I first got started in sales, I actually thought I'd be pretty good at sales until I started, and then I realized how hard it was to actually make cold calls, to write cold emails, to try to convince someone to actually buy. I thought it was really, really hard, and I really struggled. So before, I thought I'd be good because I was really good at customer service, and I was good in these customer service retail roles. I'm like, oh, cool, I could talk to people. Like when I go into sales, I'll be really good too. Not the case, especially with cold prospects. So that was a major shift, understanding that. As I started to fail forward, I started to learn different things that would just improve my game. So for example, I remember one of the big pivots mentally, and it sounds so simple now, but at the time, I really didn't understand it. And I remember just reading all these old school books, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, or whatever, and talks about how you need to be good at pitching and presenting. So I'll go in these sales calls and I'll be so focused on, you get there, ask a couple questions, and now I'm pitching how awesome my service is, how we're the best and who we service and all these things. And And of course, they'll be like, oh, cool, sounds good. Send me some information, send me a proposal, and then they would just ghost me. But early on, I didn't get to the point of proposal. So it was just like, oh, cool, not interested, see you later. But it kept
we'll call you.
The same issue. Yeah, we'll call you. We'll call you once we're ready to go. And I remember like just literally going 7 weeks in a row, closing 0 deals. And everyone else on my team was closing deals. So I couldn't blame some of the economy, which I was blaming it for. Oh, it's the economy or prospects in my territory. I'm like, people were actually closing deals around me. Not a lot, but they were closing deals, which meant I was wrong. So one of the first epiphanies I had was realizing that I need to stop pitching. I actually just need to get better at asking questions. That was probably one of the first epiphanies I had. And I remember realizing that when it was actually a point where, and I share this story in the book, where I remember it was 7-8 weeks in, and I remember going to see my doctor. At this point, like I'm like fresh out of college, right? This is like my first like physician's like, checkup in like a year. I gained a little bit of weight. My blood pressure had increased. I was probably way more stressed than I was last time I saw her. And like, my health wasn't really in great condition. Not necessarily like I'm gonna die or anything, but it was just like, that's strange. You're a young guy. Like, why do you have all these?
He's like, did you get a sales job? Did you get a sales
job? Bro, like, I'm in sales now, right? And I remember just sitting down with my doctor, and we're diving into it. And remember leaving and committing to this new plan, which is basically just eat healthier, eat more vegetables. I was eating like I was still like 17 years old, eating a healthier, more well-balanced diet, committing to actually working out properly, proper cardio, proper exercise, etc. And I remember thinking like later, I'm like, wow, that was actually pretty impressive. Like, how did she convince me to do this? Like, that's kind of interesting. Like, I was like, how did she do that? And as I started to kind of reflect back, I realized she didn't convince me. She didn't sell me. She didn't try to persuade me. I was like, all she did was ask me questions. And so I really think about, even when you think about even the process of when you go to the doctor, I'm like, and you book an appointment, that you fill an online questionnaire, or you go in person, you fill the questionnaire, which are just questions. Then you talk to the nurse, which they just ask you more questions. They measure everything, right? And then you go talk to the doctor, and they ask you more questions. And then the solution part is very small. That's it. It's like, hey, do this prescription, do this surgery, do X. And I'm like, that's how she does it. I'm like, that's how I need to start doing my process, because it was like 90% her asking me questions. And it seems so simple now, but I'm like, that's what I need to start doing. So when I started to actually shift my process to be more like that, I started seeing better results, because now I was actually having better conversations. They were actually like understanding, they were realizing their own pain now because of asking better questions. They were uncovering their problems with me. They were uncovering what their wants, needs, and desires were with me. And it was so much easier to say, cool, here's all the things you have issues with. Here is my solution. Now, over time, I started, of course, to refine that process across the board, right? From the sales process, the discovery, the demo, to prospecting. I started refining it better over time. So it got to the point where it was like very consistent. And then once I kind of created a better routine, I had consistency with it and started getting better over time, results are getting better over time. And it was just also understanding that as a salesperson, you also have to be a constant like tester of ideas, and you can't just assume one thing's going to work. That's why even in the book, I say, hey, when you read these concepts, it's really important you make it your own. Like, this is a skeleton. This is not everything. This is a skeleton. You're the muscle. Like, if you read this book, you can't be a Marcus robot. That's just not going to work. You'll definitely close more, I guarantee you, but it won't close the level you could be if you incorporate the muscle of Colin, of you out there. You put two together, and you're going to be absolutely dynamite. So inside the book, and I cover one framework. It's probably my favorite discovery framework. I call it the powerful framework. And I'm a firm believer, if we're able to uncover these powerful beliefs, which each letter it's an acronym, it stands for something. If we're going to uncover all these to a level 10 level, like of depth for every decision maker, every buying influence in the deal, our chances of closing go way up. So for example, the P is pain. Do they have a clear pain? Is it level 10 pain? Can't be level 1 pain. Is it a level 10 pain where like, oh my gosh, I need to take action now, right? How about the O, opportunity cost or cost of inaction? What happens if they don't take action? What happens if a year from now, they're still running the exact same issues they're currently running into? The W, what are their wants, needs, and desires? What do they really want? Not just for the company, but also intrinsically. Like if you're selling to a C-suite exec, yes, they might have some goals of profit or growth, whatever, but what do they want inside? Maybe they also want to hit the Inc. 5000 list because they have an ego, right? Like maybe there's something deeper than that's just beyond some of the extrinsic things we uncover. How about E, executive level influence and decision-making power? Do we uncover those type of beliefs? How about R, resources or funds? Do they believe they have the resources, not budget, but the resources or funds to acquire the capital to invest into the solutions you're talking about, right?
That's so powerful.
How about
the resources? That's the one that often gets missed because, like, yeah, they got the budget, yeah, but dude, like, change is difficult, and if you have a complex product, like, most often you're going to lose to them doing nothing because they just don't want to deal with it.
Exactly.
Even if they know they need to do it. Even if they know they need to do it.
That's right. That's exactly right. So somebody, you have to help them. So that's why it's so key to uncover not just the budget, but what are the resources available? You know, can they shift budget, right? A true high-level decision maker, if they have allocated, say, let's call it $100K towards their sales tech stack for the year, if they're a true high-level decision maker, if they find a solution that's going to make them even better, help them solve the big problems, achieve their big goals, they can take another 50K from somewhere else and move it. Or they find no different way to fund it. Well, that's what a true decision maker can truly do. Not a technical buyer, not a user buyer, but so actually make moves in the business, right?
If you hear those famous words of, yeah, we've already allocated our budget, that means you haven't asked the right questions yet. Doesn't mean that there's no budget. It means you haven't asked the right questions yet.
That's exactly it. That's exactly you go find the budget, right? And then you have F, which is fear of failure, meaning they fear they do nothing. They fear they try to do on their own, try to use a current vendor, it's just not going to work. And you got to cover that as part of it. And then you, unequivocal trust in you, the company, the solution. They have to have deep level of trust. And then last, I call the little things. That's like the tech specs, the little things you actually need to put together a price, proposal, or quote. Yes, it's important to a certain extent. That's what most people spend their time on. It's important, but it's not as important as the other parts of the framework. And if you can get the whole powerful framework nailed down in your discovery process, like I teach in the book, when you do that, your deal cycle really skyrockets much faster, especially if they're at level 10 for all of them, for every possible decision maker.